All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for dedicating all the Sherman Joshos this month with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of our refuah shema for all of those in need, in the schus of our brave soldiers, and in the schus of the return of each of our hostages. Our week of learning sponsors today, Derek and Lauren Fine, in memory of Derek's mother, Rachel Bas Shmuel Zichron Livracha, and David and Roberta Schwartz, in the schus of the safe return of Eitan Avram ben Efrat, Eitan Avram Moore from Kiryat Arba, Israel, who was one of the hostages. And of course, we dedicate all of Maseches Bava Kamma, Li'ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Yomi Charush Hashem Yikom Demo. We hope that in the merit of our Torah, all of the Neshamas will have an Aliyah, the families in Kamma, each and every one of the hostages will be returned to their family, and our soldiers will come home successful, intact, whole, b'shalom and b'karav as well. And hallelujah, we should just be zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to an everlasting period of shalom for all of Klal Yisrael. We'll say with that, let us begin. A lot, really a lot to do today. Not kidding. Did I mention we have a lot to do? So we'll say, so today's daf is Tzadik Ches 98. We are picking up on Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis 97b. So let's actually pick up again at the Tashma. So remember again, one of the interesting topics that we were dealing with over here is what happens if halacha l'maisa, you owe someone money, or the case that we actually saw at the end of, on the last line of 97a, was the following situation: that a person sold a person. Reuven sold Shimon. Reuven sold merchandise, and ultimately, again, they established the cost of the merchandise based on a certain coinage. What happens? The coin was discontinued or disqualified. Nifsal. So now the shaila becomes, what does Shimon pay back with? Right? What does Shimon pay back with? That was the shaila. So remember again with the machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Rav said ultimately again, you give whatever the current coinage is, and Shmuel says no, you could pay back with the originally agreed upon coin. And Shimon could tell Reuven, lech lemeshon, go to Meshon. By the way, that could be a little bit when you're upset with someone. You could tell them, right, go to Meshon, right? Go to Meshon, and they'll have no idea what you're talking about, but you'll feel good. Right? So the Maisa says, go to Meshon, and the money is usable there. So that was the case we were dealing with. So now the Gemara is quoting the Brisa. So Tashma, in Mechalin al Ma'os Shalkan vehin bebavel. So we'll say now Meiser Sheni. You cannot go ahead and literally redeem Meiser Sheni with money. So literal translation is you can't go ahead and redeem Meiser Sheni with money of Eretz Yisrael, the Hein Babavel. Now, who's the Hein? Take a look at Rashi just a moment. In Mechalin al Ma'os Shalkan vehin bebavel. In Mechalin Meiser Sheni al Ma'os Shalkan Yerushalayim va'Amos va'Bailim bebavel. So we'll say now, watch this. Let's say Reuven is in Bavel, and Reuven has Eretz Yisrael money, Yerushalayim money in Bavel. He wants to deconsecrate his Meiser Sheni on Eretz Yisrael money in Bavel. So he and the money are in Bavel. You can't do that. Why can't you do it? Rashi says, so we'll say, now watch this. Why can't you do it? Because we'll see that in order for money to be usable for deconsecration of Meiser Sheni, it has to be usable where you are. Money has to be usable where you are. Even though, again, it's interesting, even though the ultimate destination of the money is where? Yerushalayim Kodesh. But nevertheless, halacha l'maisa, the money has to be usable in the very place where you are. So therefore, again, if halacha l'maisa, again, I'm in Bavel, and I have Eretz Yisrael, and my Meiser Sheni is in Bavel, but my money is Eretz Yisrael money, it doesn't work. Next, V'shel Bavel v'hein kan. What about ultimately, again, if I have Babylonian money? Right, and the Meiser Sheni are in Eretz Yisrael. Shal Bavel v'hein bavel, or if halacha l'maisa, again, I'm in Bavel, and right, the money is a Babylonian money, then mechalin, then it works. So what do you see from here? Katan mihas, you see from here, ein mechalin al ma'os shalkan v'hein bavel. Afal gav d'sofa l'meisek lahasam. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that if you're in Bavel, your Meiser Sheni is in Bavel, but your money is in Eretz Yisrael money, but your money is Eretz Yisrael money. And remember, what does this presuppose? This presupposes that halacha l'maisa, Eretz Yisrael money is not readily usable in Bavel. Right? So you see from here, and even though that what? Even though that halacha l'maisa, you're going to Eretz Yisrael. So remember, I'm using money to deconsecrate my Meiser Sheni in Bavel, even though the money is not usable in Bavel, but I have obviously an intended trip to Yerushalayim. And yet you see that it doesn't work. So we'll say, see from here that for transactional purposes, money has to be usable in the place where the transaction is occurring. That's bottom line what we take from here. So if I was kind of looping this back, so even though I'm, so to speak, going to go to Meishan, you see that transactionally that type of money does not work, which seems to support the position of Rav, and ultimately doesn't support Shmuel. To which the Gemara says, no. Hacham asking, what's the case over here? Kishamalchios makpidos zu al zu. They both say this is a case over here where what? Where Allah L'maisa, there was a hakpada between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael. So remember again, in that kind of case, even Shmuel, who says ultimately that what? Lech Lameshan, go to Meshan. In other words, as long as there's a place that you can use your money, even he says when there's the real possibility to use your money in that second location. But if because of international strife, right, or monarchical strife, there's not the ability to go ahead and use money from one location to another, even Shmuel would agree that it doesn't work. So the Gemara says, Ihaki, if that's the case, Lamai Chazi. Ihaki shall Bavel, vehein bebavel amai chazu. So I'll say, so one second, if that's the case, that there is friction between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, so Babylonian money, right, can't make it there, so that here's the problem. Even in the case, we'll say, where we said before, excuse me, even in the case where I said before that I'm in Bavel and I'm using Babylonian money, that shouldn't work either. Why? Because listen, what am I doing? I'm deconsecrating Meiser Sheni onto Babylonian money, and then presumably what? Taking that Babylonian money where? Right? To Yerushalayim. So it's not going to work. Money's not going to work. So why should that transaction work? To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you what it works. It works in order to go ahead. I will say, this is actually very interesting. I never thought about this with Meiser Sheni before. So the case over here is where a guy is taking his produce, deconsecrating it onto money, and then going ahead and what? And taking the money to buy a sheep in Bavel, and then taking the sheep up to Yerushalayim. So I will say, we normally think to ourselves, you take produce from Meiser Sheni, deconsecrate it onto money, put the money in your pocket, and you travel. The whole goal of it is ease of use. So the truth is, again, that only works if the money that you are deconsecrating on is going to be usable in Yerushalayim. But in this case over here, let's say the money is not usable. There's another eitzah. What's the other eitzah? Deconsecrate the produce onto money. Because also remember again, produce has a problem. What's the problem? Produce? Spoilage. So especially if I'm in Bavel. But again, what can I do? Take that money, put it on a sheep. So the nice part, right, what's the problem? What's the problem with the sheep? I mean, you think traveling with kids is a headache, right? Like, who could only imagine, right? Can you imagine you get onto the coach section, you have overhead compartment, where do you put the sheep, right? So Lamaisa, not pashut, right? But Lamaisa, first of all, there's no spoilage, right? And number two, at least you're traveling with one thing as opposed to baskets and baskets of fruit. So what you would do over here in this kind of case is you take the money, buy a sheep, which you could do, I will say, right? You could take Meiser Sheni money, then spend it on livestock, let's say, and then take the livestock up to Yerushalayim. So that would be the case over here. All right. But we learned his skin is shemos, but I will say, but this is interesting. The Brisa says over here that in Yerushalayim, this is incredible. Yerushalayim, if you think about it, Yerushalayim has to be an international city, right? You have Jews coming from all over. So in Yerushalayim, they instituted that any kind of currency is usable. Isn't that incredible? Right? Yerushalayim, any kind of currency is usable. The Gemara says, right, fine. So Rashi says over here, "Va'amai tani le'el v'lo shel bava v'hein kan." So we'll say, so if that's the case, that any kind of currency was usable in Yerushalayim, so why did the Brayso say beforehand that Babylonian currency wasn't readily usable? So this is incredible. Lo kashya kan bizman sheyad Yisrael tekifa al umos ha'olam kan bizman sheyad Yisrael sheyad umos ha'olam tekifa al atzman. So Rabbi say everything depends. Obviously, yes, Yerushalayim is an international city. When is Yerushalayim an international city that accepts currencies from everywhere? That's when Klal Yisrael was in charge. And Klal Yisrael was in charge, right? But ultimately, again, that's when all types of currency were accepted. But when Gentile nations ruled over Eretz Yisrael, then ultimately, again, so it wasn't necessarily a given that all forms of currency were accepted. I will say it's a tremendous Musar Haskell as well. Eretz Yisrael flourishes when it's under Jewish control. That's the way it works, right? The land opens up. The land self-actualizes, right? The land ultimately is bountiful when Klal Yisrael controls it. There's a certain activation of the land. So here you see, when is Yerushalayim an international city that accepts all kinds of currency? Sheyad Yisrael Tekifa, when ultimately, again, it's the undivided capital of the Jewish people. That's ultimately when Yerushalayim becomes, so to speak, the best version of itself. When there are other conquering nations, the city is just not the same. Incredible. So we'll say, now that we're talking about coins, a very beautiful Gemara here. So Tana Abanon, Eizehu Mapesha Yerushalayim. We'll say, what was the coin? I guess like the standard coin of Yerushalayim. So listen to this. Davidu Shlomo mitzad echad. It was an image, although again I will say Rashi points out over here, it wasn't an image, right? Because there's an issue with making images, especially again images that stand out. So what Rashi points out over here, it says it was written, on one side of the coin was written David and Shlomo, and on the other side of the coin, Mitzad Ech of Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh Mitzad Acher. We're saying ultimately again, and Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh was written on the other side. That was the coin of Yerushalayim. We'll say, what's the message in that coin? What's the message in that coin? So we'll say, what do David and Shlomo represent? David and Shlomo represent profound Mesiras Nefesh for the creation and building of Yerushalayim, right? David HaMelech is the one ultimately who conquered Yerushalayim from the Yevusi. He went ahead and he bought the site of the Beis HaMikdash. He created Sefer Tehillim, ultimately again to be the songs of the Levium, and Shlomo was the one who mobilized virtually the entirety of Klal Yisrael to go ahead and build the Beis HaMikdash. How do you have a Yerushalayim? How do you have Yerushalayim? You only have Yerushalayim if you have people who are willing to be Moser Nefesh. All right, Yerushalayim doesn't just come to us. Yerushalayim is only ours because of the Mesiras Nefesh of great people and simple people alike. That's the David and Shlomo on one side, Mesiras Nefesh. If there's David and Shlomo, then the other side, there's Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Incredible. What about the coin of Avram Avinu? Veizu Mapesha Avram Avinu. So apparently, Avram Avinu had his own coin. He had his own coin. Now, what's the pshat that Avram Avinu had his own coin? So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he was so famous that again they made the coinage around him, or maybe it was like an Avram Avinu commemorative coin. I don't know if he came to his tent. He gave you whatever. But Lamaisa, what was the matbeh of Avram Avinu? This is beautiful. Zakin uzakina mitzad echad. Ultimately, an old man and an old woman on one side, and here again, right? So Rashi says the Zakin and the Zkina were Avram and Sarah on one side, Ubachar Ubesula mitzad acher, and a young man and a young woman on the other side. Who are the young man and the young woman? Rashi says over Yitzchak and Rivka. Tosfos again points out over here. Tosfos points out over here that halacha l'maisa, that once again it was written. It was written. It wasn't actual images. So we'll say, so what does this mean? Avram, right? So again, obviously, the imagery, the beautiful Avram and Sarah on one side, Yitzchak and Rivka on the other side, but it could also very well be that Pasha Pshat. I don't know. I found it interesting that Rashi chose to interpret it as Zakin and Zkina is one couple, and Bachar and Besula is another couple. It could very well be that it's ultimately also the same couple. That ultimately, again, it's Avram and Sarah young, right? Bachar and Besula, and Avram and Sarah as older on the other side of both sides. What was the gadlus of Avram Avinu? What was the gadlus of Avram Avinu? The greatness of Avram, well, there are many dimensions, but one of the most incredible things was the Avraham Zokein ba bayom in Parshas Chayei Sarah. Avram was old, advanced in days. Advanced in days. So I'll say, so that obviously is repetitive, right? If he's old, he's advanced in days. Rav Shem Shnefel Hirsch says something so incredibly beautiful. He says, Avram Zokein, ultimately again means he was old. What does it mean, ba bayomim? Ba bayomim means he aged gracefully. He came with his days. I will say, now what does that mean? It's not a reference to his physical aging. I will say, I've heard something beautiful. He says, sometimes as people get older, they lament the things they can no longer do. When I was young, this didn't hurt, right? And this didn't creak, and this didn't this, and I could do this, and I could do that. And so much of older age, or advanced age, mature age, is spent lamenting the inability to do what I could do when I was young. The greatness of Avraham Avinu was the ability to find meaning in every single stage of life. And while it's true that at certain stages, both say, when you're young, very often for many periods of youth, you're dumb, right? And then again, as I get older, I suddenly acquire wisdom. So there are things in my youth that I could not do, and there are things in my old age that I could not do, that I can no longer do. Every stage of life brings with it its own set of opportunities. And the greatness of Avram Avinu was he never lamented on what was, or he never lamented on what I can no longer do. Instead, Avram Zokein, even when he was old, ba bayomim. What can I do now? What can I do now? And maybe that's the pshat in the Avram Avinu coin as well. The ability to find meaning as a bachar and a besula, and the ability to find meaning as a zakin and a zakena. So I'll say two profound coins. If you think about it, I'll say these are the coins you carry with you. One coin for each pocket. One coin for each pocket. In one pocket, carry the coin of Avram Avinu, Avram and Sarah, which tells you find meaning at every stage. And I will say, by the way, it's not just about physical aging as well. It's also about sometimes in life we miss opportunities or we make tremendous mistakes. And we're so angry at ourselves. I can't believe I missed it. I can't believe I messed up. And we beat ourselves up over and over and over and over. We can't move on. We can't move on. You got to leave it on the other side of the coin, right? There's meaning in every stage. That's one coin for one pocket. The other coin in the other pocket is your Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh coin. And what does that tell you? If you want to accomplish great things in life, if you want to create your own Yerushalayim, Mesiras Nefesh, you have to be ready to sacrifice. You have to be ready to push yourself. Without sacrifice, there's absolutely no Yerushalayim. Incredible. So watch this. You lent your friend money. And what you did is you locked in payment based on a certain coin. There's nothing wrong with this. In other words, I go ahead and I lend Reuben $1,000. I say, Reuben, pay me back $1,000, and I want you to go ahead and pay me back in a silver shekel. By the way, I will say the other piece also I've just forgot to mention is Tosfos also points out that the other reason why they instituted that in Yerushalayim you accept all forms of currency is not just Ma'aser Sheni. It's also about Chatzi Shekel, Machzis Shekel. Right? Everybody had to bring Machzis Shekel. So not everybody has a shekel, tsuri, a Tyrian short. So again, they had to put it that all types of currency are accepted in Yerushalayim. Fine. So anyway, so I lend Reuben $1,000. I say, Reuben, you pay back $1,000, and we stipulate the type of currency that he's going to pay me back in. So what's the halacha? Now what ended up happening? That type of currency, they added on to the value of that currency. Rashi says over here, "Vosifu alav alehen ma'u alibadrav da'amar nosin lo matbeh sha'osa shah." So we'll say, so here's the shaila. So let's say, for argument's sake, I lend Reuben $1,000. I say, Reuben, here's the deal. You're going to pay me back in shekel, in shkalim, for argument's sake. Now what happens? The value of the shekel goes up. So now the shaila is, how does Reuven pay me back? How does he pay me back? So the Gemara says, Amar lo. So ultimately, again, so he says to him, you give him the coin. Whatever they stipulated, that's what you give him. Even, that literally means, even if the coin becomes as big as a sieve, even if it becomes as big as a jug, he said yes. I will say that what that means is, it doesn't literally mean the coin is becoming as big. What it means is, even if the value even if the value ultimately, again, becomes so amplified, do you still pay back with that coin? And the answer is yes. But one second, that's not really fair, because remember, the value, the cost of produce is going down. In other words, the buying power obviously is more, so the cost of produce is going down. So we look, if the cost of produce is going down because of the increased amplified value of the money, then ultimately, again, we'll reevaluate the repayment amount. Top of Sadechas 98a, the machmas tara zil. But if at the end of the day, the reason why the cost of produce went down is variable, say, nothing to do with the value of currency, rather why? Supply and demand. There's a lot more supply. There was a lot more rain, and therefore there's much more supply. Therefore, again, lo menachem, then we don't readjust the repayment amount. But one second, but here's the problem. We'll say, they're talking about over here, when they speak about amplified value, we'll say, why did coinage have amplified value in terms of the Gemara? Their case here is fascinating, is because they added more silver to the coin itself. Literally, again, in the minting of the coin, there's more silver. So the Gemara says over here, the coin itself is worth more money. How so? If you were to melt it down, you would emerge with actually more silver. This is very interesting. Of the uvda bizuzi, the agredimas taya. So we'll say, so listen to this. Rav Papa, Rav Huna, and Rav Huna Bar Yoshua, they had this situation with the zuz, and they took it to this guy, Agrodimus, the merchant. He was an Arab merchant, and what happened? They said as follows: Agyud betamnia. So we'll say what they did is this guy, this merchant, his specialty was coins, and what he was able to show ultimately again is that halacha l'maisa, 8 of the new coins was the equivalent of 10 of the old coins. So we'll say, so the point over here is that halacha l'maisa, again, we do look as to what the valuation of the new coinage is vis-a-vis the old coins. Interesting. Sorry. So we'll say, so just want to point out, so again, you have this ongoing machlokes Rav and Shmuel about paying back with coinage that is no longer usable in the locale in which the transaction occurred, but it is usable somewhere else. An outgrowth of that is what happens just when the valuation of the coinage changes. So that's also fundamental machlokes, and again, it really depends ultimately, again, what that change of valuation is actually a result of. Is it just a result, ultimately, again, of changes in pricing, or could it be that halacha l'maisa it's a result ultimately of action, more silver in the coinage as well? Amar we'll say another really interesting case. Tzaddik Chesam Aleph 98a, 4 lines down. Amar Rabba, Hazorik ma'peh shachaver liyamagad pater. We'll say, listen to this. If halacha l'maisa, this is crazy. I go over to Ruvain, I take his coin, and I will say literally, I throw it into the Yamagadol. Yamagadol is Mediterranean. I take his coin, I throw it into the sea. Pater. I'm pater. My time, I will say, this is great. Why am I pater? Amar ha manach kamach. Ibai shakli. I say to Ruvain, your coin is not lost. It's right there in the Mediterranean, right? Go ahead. It's not lost. It's not like I threw it into a fire and it doesn't exist, right? I threw it into space and it's in the water. It's in the water, right? Put on your bathing suit, snorkel gear, and you could get it. It's right there. And by the way, this only applies in clear water where you can literally see it, right? However, aval achurin delo kachazi lo. But I will say, if it's like murky water, where ultimately again you can't see it, then halacha l'maisa says doesn't apply. Furthermore, so I will say furthermore, and this is a very important clarification or qualification, this applies when you bumped into Ruvain. So I'm walking, I bump into Ruvain. As a result of me bumping into him, the coin flies out of his hands into the water. So now I can say to him, Ruvain, I'm not chayiv for that, because at the end of the day, your coin is there. Your coin is there, again, assuming that it's clear water, you could just go down there and get it. But I will say, if I go over to Ruvain, I take his coin and I throw it into the water, then I'm chayiv. Why? Because the act of taking it, migzal gazle hashava by me'avid. Because I will say, the act of going over to someone else and taking their property, so that's called theft. That's called theft. And what's the halacha by theft? A thief acquires the object. Once I acquire it, obviously I'm obligated to make restitution. Incredible. Masiv Rava, so Rava brings down a shayla. Ein mechalin amo she'ena b'shuso. But say you cannot deconsecrate ma'aser sheni on money that is not in your domain. For examlo, keitzad hayulo ma'os b'kistira o b'har hamelech o shenafal kiso liyam hagadol ein mechalalin. So Rava say, let's say you have money at an off-site location. Right? Again, the examples are Kistira or Haramelech, okay? Or for that matter, now by the way, Rashi points out over here, the reason why the Gemara chooses Kistira or Haramelech is apparently these were faraway places where it was dangerous to access. Okay, I don't know that it matters per se. Or for that matter, we'll say what happens, my money falls into the water, and I go ahead and I say, you know what, my Ma'aser Sheni should become deconsecrated on that money. On that money. The halacha is it doesn't work. Now both say, now what do you see from here? That if money is not accessible, it's not yours. It's not yours. So say, so kind of bringing this full circle, what does that tell me also? If I bump into Ruvain, and as a result, Ruvain goes ahead and drops his money into the water, saying, hey Ruvain, don't worry about it. It's accessible to you. It's right there. It's right there. Just go and get it. Sorry. Sorry. So telling him that it's right there, and you can get it, ultimately again, is not enough. So I will say, so again, it contradicts what we said before. So how do you reconcile this? So Amar Rabba, Shiny in Meiser. So Rabbi says, no. Meiser Sheni is different. Why? Because Meiser Sheni has a different din. The din by Meiser Sheni ultimately is Meiser Sheni has to be readily accessible. The Rachmana Amar v'tzarta hakesef biyadecha. So I will say, remember again, it could very well be that it's not fair to compare Meiser Sheni to anything else because Meiser Sheni has a din of accessibility. It has to be immediately accessible. Where do you get that from? Because the Torah says, you shall take the money, biyadecha, in your hands. So in order for Ma'aser Sheni deconsecration to work, that money has got to be in your hands. If it's not in your hands, ultimately, again, doesn't work. Okay. What's the interesting case over here? Hashaf mabeh shachaver pater. Now, listen to this case. If ultimately, again, now shaf mabeh shachaver literally means you smooth out your friend's coin. Now, what's really happening over here, as you can imagine, I go over to Ruvain, he has a coin. Now, say coin. Remember again, what makes a coin a coin? What makes a coin a coin? The tzura, the image. Otherwise, it's just like a slug, right? So it's a coin. So what do? I go ahead and I hammer down the coin so that there's no image. It's just like a flat piece of metal, right? I'm sorry. A blank? Yeah, blank. Good. Yeah, a blank. So what happens? Well, listen to this. I'm potter. What's the logic? My time. The ha lo avid velo midi. Because I say I didn't really do anything. In other words, the coin is still there. So the Gemara says, I gave you a little bit. So I will say, this is assuming you're hammering it. Why I will say? Because when you hammer, what's the chap? The entire metal content is still there, right? So the entire metal content ultimately again is still there. So lemaisa, nothing's really changed. Nothing's really changed. However, the Gemara says, "Aval shayfa b'shufina chisuri chasrei." But if halacha l'maisa, ultimately you chisel it, then I will say that's problematic. Why? Because if you're chiseling it, then obviously what's happening over here? You're removing some of the coin. Okay, the Gemara says, Masiv Rava, so Rava raises a kasha. So I will say, this is interesting. So now, what the Gemara essentially says, I will say, is really, watch this. So now if I go over to Ruvain, I take his coin, I hammer it. So I will say, so now what's interesting is, even though now, it's no longer really usable as a coin, right? Because it doesn't have a tzura anymore, but it's still silver, or whatever the metal is, right? Whatever the metal is, the metallic content is still unchanged, and therefore I am potter. Very interesting. So now Gemara is the kasha. Masiv Rava, hiko al eino v'sama. But say if you hit someone or you hit your eved on his eye and you blind him, al oznav v'charsha, or you hit him on his ear and he goes deaf. So eved yoseh ben lecher. Suppose these are the type of injuries that ultimately again would cause an eved to go free. Keneged eino. We'll say what happens if you go ahead. We spoke about this case. We'll say you create like a large noise or something opposite the eved's eye, and as a result he goes blind. Keneged oznav ve'eino shomea, or opposite his ear and he can no longer hear. Ein eved yoseh ben lecherus. Ultimately, again, an eved does not go out to cher. So remember again, we spoke about this case, that why is it that if you do something opposite him, he doesn't go free, right? It's him, it's his choice, the Gemara says, right? On a deeper level, we have the choice how to process external stimuli, right? That is our choice. So the eved, so to speak, is just, so we'll say, now, what does this case have to do with anything? Now watch this, I will say. When Reuven goes over to his eved and blinds the eved's eye, is the entirety of the eye still there? Is it still there? Yeah. The whole eye is there. Just what? It's no longer working. And yet again, the eved goes free. So you see from here that just because something is fully intact doesn't mean that you haven't damaged it. Right? The eye is present, but it's not working. Because it's not working, the eved goes free. So therefore, Allah wants to suggest, why wouldn't you say the same thing? If I go over to Reuven, I take his coin, I hammer out the image, why at the end of the day is that not called damage? So Rabbi Latamei Damar Rabba, Charsho li Aviv, Nerag. It'll say if you cause your father to go deaf, you are ultimately again put to death. You're put to death, right? Why? Bible says she'ef shelecharisha below chabura. Now, we'll say because by definition, causing someone to go in general. Let's take a step back, right? Maki ava v'ima mos yumas. If you injure your parent, ultimately again, right? That's why if you make a chabura, you have to make a wound. So we'll say, for example, if someone were to slap their parent, right, and it weren't to create a wound or an injury, technically speaking, not good, but not put to death. So we'll say, so here's interesting. So you might have thought if a person goes over to his parent and makes his parent deaf, right? So again, there's no chabura per se, right? There's no externally seen injury. To which the Gemara says, no, you're put to death. Why? She'ef shalacharisha below chabura. The tafkadama naflele ba'onye, because we'll say it has to be internally. There was some type of chabura. Literally, the Gemara says that a drop of blood fell into the ear canal. Vamarava. And Rabbi says as follows. Rabbi says, well, so you see from here, what's the point of this? Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Rabbi l'tamei hilchach gabe eved nami chisarenhu u'kineged azna pater. So the idea over here is that Rabbi holds that even things that don't look like a chabura or an internal injury, there is an internal chabura. So the same way that if you make your father, Reuven goes over to his father Yaakov and punches him in the ear and makes him deaf, even though externally you don't see anything, we assume that there was an internal chabura. Same thing over here with the blinding of the eye. So the Gemara Rabba says, Hatsorei ozen parasa shel chavero pater. So I'll say just a lot of interesting random cases. I go over to my friends, so I'll say, watch this. I go over to Reuven's cow, and what do? I nick the ear of the cow, right? Don't ask why, whatever. I'm not strong enough for cow tipping, right? So this is the next best thing, cow nicking, right? So I go ahead and I nick the ear of the cow. So I'll say, I'm potter. So what's the pshat? My taima, parakid the kaima. I'll say, why? Because it's the same cow. It's the same cow, right? The cow has not changed. The Gemara says, never say, but that's not true. What have I done? Right? It now has a mum. As a mum, it's disqualified for a carbon. The Gemara says, the kulu shivarim lav lagabe mizbeach kaimi. So we'll say, this is so fascinating. So Rabbi says, the statistical probability is that this cow is never going to be used for a carbon. Right? Not everybody is a winner. Not everybody gets a trophy. Right? So Lamaisa, not everybody makes it to the Mizbeach. So the Gemara says something very interesting over here, right? So therefore, if I go over to Reuven's cow, I nick the ear. The truth is, I haven't done anything, right? As a cow, his cow identity is fully intact, right? Whatever avoda or anything else, ultimately, again, he needed to do. So Lamaisa, again, it's fine. A carbon, Okay, the statistical probability is the overwhelming majority of animals are not used for karbanos. So therefore, again, at the end of the day, it didn't really do anything, and therefore I'm pater. So interesting. So Masiv Rava says, whoa, 1 second, let's analyze this. Bless you. We'll say, if you have waters of para aduma, and you do work with that water, ube paras chatas, or you do work with the paraduma himself, pater medine adam v'chai v'dine shar. So we'll say in this case over here, you're pater medine adam, right? You're pater in a court of law, but you are chayiv in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now we'll say now why is that? Remember again, this is a case of what? Hezek de'eno nikar, right? Hezek de'eno nikar. So we'll say, because remember again, the halacha is if you do work with a paraduma, puzzle. You do work with the waters of the. We'll say, by the way, how do you do work with the waters of the paraduma? What's the paradigmatic case? Paradigmatic case is weights, counter, right? Counterweights. So again, so in these cases, if you do it, you disqualify it, but it's hezek she'eno nikar, it's unrecognizable damage. So therefore, again, with hezek she'eno nikar, you're chayiv b'dinei shemaim in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you are pater b'dinei adam. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So the Gemara Malachu delo minkar. Malachu delo minkar hazeka. Now I will say, the reason why you're pater in the case of working the paraduma, why? Because I will say that is a case of unrecognizable damage. Aval soreim ozno soreim the minkar hazeka hachanami the mechai b'dinei adam. So I will say, but 1 second, what can you infer from here? It's only something like work where the damage is totally unrecognizable. But if you were to go ahead and nick the ear of the cow, of the paraduma, we'll say, seems to be clear that what? You would be chayiv. You would be chayiv. So that conscious we just said before. Amri, huadin dafilut tsorim pater. The truth is, even if you were to nick the ear, you'd also be pater. The Gemara says, Savaha kamash mulan dafilu malacha delo minkar hazega chay b'dinei shamayim. So I'll say, what's the novelty over here? It goes without saying that halacha l'maisa with tsorim you're pater. Even if you were to nick the ear, you would be pater. Because ultimately, again, it's going to be called hezek she'eno nikar. It doesn't really change anything. What's the chiddush? The chiddush I will say is that if you worked the animal where there's absolutely nothing recognizable, you would have thought that you should even be pater b'dinei shamayim, kamash malan, you're chayiv. That's the novelty. So Rabba says, another interesting case, hasoref shtaro shel chavero pater. This is fascinating, I will say. I go over to Ruvain. Ruvain has a loan document, right? Ruvain lent $10,000 to Shimon. I go over to Ruvain, I take the document, I burn it. What's talacha? I'm pater. Why? Last line. Damarle naira kaloi minach. What did I do? I didn't damage you. I burnt a piece of paper. I did not damage you. I would say now. So this is one of these interesting things over here, right? If you look at what Ruvain did, if you look at what I did, I burnt a piece of paper. That is a true statement. Oh, maybe not the full truth. In other words, it's not just any piece of paper. It's the paper that entitles Ruvain to go and collect the debt from Shimon. But Lamais, when you look from a damage perspective, what did I damage? So I'll say, Maskif Larayim Bar Kamma. Rabbi Shmuel raised the kasha. Hechi dummy. What's the case? I'm a base. Whoa. All right. Hechi dummy. I pretended like I didn't know it was on Amud Beis, but now like many things in life, I pretend like they don't exist, and now I have to confront reality. Here we go. So the Gemara says, what's the case? So the Gemara says, So let's analyze this. What's the case over here? If there are witnesses who know what happened transactionally between Reuven and Shimon, then the truth is not a big deal. Why? Just rewrite a new shtar. That is not a big deal. So the Gemara says, however, sahadi anan minna yadinan. So let's say, so now remember, if there are no witnesses, let's play this out. So if they're right, I go over to Reuven, I take Reuven's loan document. Reuven lent $10,000 to Shimon. I take the loan document, I destroy it. Reuven's like, give out. You just went ahead and destroyed my loan document. So I'll say, so now Rabbi says I'm pater. So let's analyze this. If there are witnesses who know, can testify that Reuven lent money to Shimon, no problem to recreate the shtar. If there are no witnesses, I'll say, and now Reuven's claiming that was a shtar that said that I lent money to Shimon, so I'll say, so who says we believe him? Who says we believe him? In other words, watch that. To which the Gemara says, no. Amar Rava says, Teheba ma'amino. It must be the case over here is where halacha l'maisa, where halacha l'maisa ultimately again there's credibility, right? The Baal Shtar, right? So before I burnt it, I said no. Here's what it said on the shtar. The Baal Shtar, the parties believe me ultimately again to what was written in the shtar. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rav Dimi bar Chanina had Rabba machlokes Rabbi Shimon Rabbanani. So Rav Dimi bar Chanina said this statement of Rabba. Now again, so remember we've got Rabba on record saying that if you go ahead and you burn the loan document of your friend, you are patur. You are patur. So now comes along Rav Dimi bar Chanina and says, by the way, this statement of Rabbah is in Machlokas Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanon. How so? The Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon, davar hagorim lemamon ki mamon dami mechayiv. They both say, remember we've seen this before about a davar hagorim lemamon. What if you have something that is not inherently money, right? Doesn't have inherent value, but ultimately, again, it's the cause of something financial. So in other words, it ultimately either it could cause someone financial liability, or ultimately again allows someone to collect on something. So the paradigmatic example of that is a loan document. So I will say a loan document itself is doesn't have an inherent value. It's a piece of paper, but it's what we call a davar hagorem lemamon. Ultimately, again, it allows someone to have a financial benefit, right? Creditor has that document. He has the ability to go ahead and collect his debt. So we'll say, so what is the status if you damage davar hagorem lemamon? So according to Rabbi Shimon, who says davar hagorem lemamon ki mamon dami mechayiv. So what Rabbi Shimon says, something that enables a financial benefit, right? Something literally again that causes financial benefit has the status of money. So therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, I will say, if you burn a loan document, then what? Yichayiv. Because davar hagorim lemamon is kimamon. The Rabbanan da'amri davar hagorim lemamon lav kimamon dami lo mechayiv. I will say, according to the Rabbanan, I will say first wide line. According to the Rabbanan who say that a davar hagorim lemamon is not kimamon, then ultimately you're not chayiv. So I will say, so again, the Rabbanan say, just because something ultimately enables a financial benefit does not make that item into a mammon instrument. So I will say, this fascinating machlokes is dafka this case. I go over to Ruvain, I take Ruvain Shtar Hava's loan document that says that he lent Shimon $10,000 and I burn it. Have I done anything? So the Gemara wants to suggest now Rabbah said, I'm sorry, Rabbah said, I am patur. The Gemara wants to now suggest, by the way, this is a machlokes Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanon. And what is it a machlokes in? Davar hagorim lemamon is something that causes financial benefit. Does that have the status of money or not? Rabbi Shimon says yes, and therefore ultimately again, I'm chayav for burning the document. The Rabbanon say no, and therefore ultimately I'm not chayav for burning the documents. Here we go. So maskifla, Rav Huna Brei Rav Yoshua, Amar the Shammos Leil Rabbi Shimon, Davar hagorim lemamon ki mamon dami. So it comes along, Rav Huna Brei Rav Yoshua, and they say like this: when does Rabbi Shimon say that davar hagorim lemamon ki mamon dami, that ultimately again something that enables for a financial benefit, ultimately again is like mamon itself? Bedavar sheikara mamon kidraba. We'll say it really refers to something. That item itself still has to have an inherent value, right? In other words, ultimately, shikara mamon means it has to have some level of inherent value. Damar Rabbah, listen to this, because Rabbah said, we've seen this case so many times in the last little while. Gazal chametz lefnei Pesach, listen to this. I stole chametz before Pesach. And then what happened? Uba achar besarfo, ultimately again, then someone else came along and burnt it. So both say, so now I stole chametz, right? So just get this straight. I stole chametz before Pesach from Ruvain. And now what happens? Shimon comes along and burns the chametz. So the Gemara says, b'moed. He burns it ultimately again on Yom Tiv. Now Rashi says over here, not really on Yom Tiv, but Bizman Bi'uro. Moed over here in this context means in the appointed time, right? In the right time for destruction of Chametz. Then Pater. Ultimately again, then Shimon, the guy who came along and burnt the Chametz, is going to be Pater. Why? Shakom Mitzuvah Alav Levaro. Because we'll say, remember again, on Erev Pesach, a couple hours into the day, you're kind of obligated to burn all chametz. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, Shimon is going to be pater, right? La'achar Pesach, but what happens if halacha l'maisa, again, he destroyed it after Pesach? So in that case, I will say, ultimately, remember, after Pesach, there is no din of beer, right? There is no din of destruction. Now watch this. Machlokes Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. This is so interesting. Rabbi say there is a machlokes Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. What's the machlokes? The Rabbi Shimon damer davar agon l'mamon ki mamon dami chayiv. So we'll say according to Rabbi Shimon. Now remember, after Pesach, what is this? After Pesach, this is chametz she'avar alav haPesach. What is the halacha with chametz she'avar alav haPesach? Aser ba'ana. Right? You can't do anything with it. You can't do anything with it. So I say, so now what happens? So now I stole this from Reuven. Someone else comes along and destroys the chametz. So Shabbos says, so now the shaila is, what's the liability? So according to Rabbi Shimon, who holds davar hagari l'mamon ki mamon dami, that ultimately again, now remember I'll say, this chametz is a davar hagari l'mamon. How is it a davar hagari l'mamon? Because remember again, I'm going to owe Reuven back money, right? So therefore again, this chametz causes a financial outlay. So according to Rabbi Shimon, I'm going to be chayiv. Now we'll say, now there's one more wrinkle in this. Not wrinkle, but one more interesting piece where Rashi points out, which is I will say, remember again, technically speaking, if I have that chametz after Pesach, right? I stole chametz from Reuven, Pesach passed. Now it's after Pesach. I want to be a Baal Tshuva. What could I do? Remember we learned this halacha, it's the Mishnah. What could I do? I can give him back the chametz. And what could I say to him? Harei shachal lefanecha. Here it is. So now I will say, even though this is chametz she'avar alav haPesach, which at the end of the day is aser ba'ana, when someone else comes along and destroys it, there's liability. Why? Because this was a davar hagorim l'mamon. Ultimately, again, I could have gone ahead and used this as restitution. Now that it's destroyed, I can no longer use it, and now I'm going to be on the hook for additional money. The Rabbanan amri davar hagorim lav ki mamon dami pater, but according to the Rabbanan, ultimately again who hold davar hagorim l'mamon as lav ki mamon, I'm going to be pater. Why? Bedavar sheni kara. So the Gemara said, bedavar sheni kara mi amrinon. Amra Meimar, man didoin dina degarmi magbibei demei shtarim alya. So we'll say now the Gemara comes along and a Meimar comes along. And Meimar says like this. All right, we'll say a lot being thrown at us today. So now watch this. A Meimar says the truth is it depends. Do you adjudicate garmi cases? Now we'll say we in just a couple of days from now we're going to get into this. Right now, we're not going to differentiate between grama and garmi. For our purposes, it's the same thing. What is it? Causation. Ultimately, again, I do something which results in a secondary result, right? It's what we'll call like indirect damage. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Amar Meimar, man did in dina degarmi magbi be demei shtarim alya. So we'll say the one who holds that you're chayiv ultimately again for secondary damages. Ultimately again we'll say that halacha l'maisa you collect the value of a regular shtar. Uman delo da in dina degarmi magbi be demei naira ba'alma. So Rabbi says interesting. So if you hold of garmi, right, indirect damages. So if you destroy a loan document, you're really responsible for the loan, right? If, however, halacha l'maisa again, you don't hold dina degarmi, so Rabbi say I have secondary of indirect damages. So what am I chayiv for? I'm only chayiv for the value of the paper. So the Gemara says, Hava uvda v'kaf yiraf from Rav Ashi v'ag bibe kishur l'tzalma. So we'll say there was an episode like this. And what happened? Raf from forced Rav Ashi. So we'll say this is actually interesting. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Now what's going on over here with Rafam and Rav Ashi? So Rashi says over here, Shesaraf shtar chavera bialduso. I'll say this is pretty interesting. Apparently Rav Ashi burnt someone's loan document when he was young. All right, let's say all of us have that stuff from our youth that we know, right? Whatever. So apparently Rav Ashi burnt someone's loan document when he was young, right? So now Rafram made him make restitution. Va'agbi bey ki kishur l'tzalma. Made him literally, we'll say, pay like the beam used for images. Now what does that mean? Va'agbi minei. Rashi says govayna ma'alya kol masha kasav b'shtar ki kishur l'tzalma. Now we'll say. Now what's interesting over here is as Rashi says piron gamar mina idis kikura. So we'll say, essentially, he made him pay from like idis, from the best property. So we'll say, literally, again, the type of beam used for making, engraved images. Where I guess for engraved images, you have to make, for engravings, you have to use a very high quality beam. You can't use any beam. So we'll say, so what do you see from here? This is very interesting. Whatever ended up happening over here was Rav Ashi destroyed someone's loan document, and effectively Rafram made him pay the value of the loan. Essentially, what the Gemara is ending off with over here is when you destroy a loan document, so it's not like Rabbah that says you're pater, right? It's not ultimately, again, hezek sheno nicker, right? It's not ultimately just destroying a piece of paper, and it's not davar hagarim lemamon lav kimamon dami. When you destroy a loan document, I will say, what are you effectively doing? You are preventing the creditor from going ahead and collecting on that debt. That is a loss. That is damages, and therefore ultimately again you are chai for the full extent of those damages. Incredible. So also we saw before that what is the Mishnah? I steal chametz from Reuven before Pesach. Now Pesach goes by. Oh, and I still have the chametz. I can take the chametz back to Reuven and say, here you go. I'm giving you back the item that I stole. Even though what, Rabbi say? Even though what? What's the value of the chametz now? Zero value. So the Gemara says, "Man tani omrim be'isuri hana harei shachal lefanecha." But say, who is the opinion that says when it comes to isuri hana, ultimately all you need to do is give back the object to the person and say, "Here you go." Rav Yaakov Desanya Shor Shehemes Achla Nigmar Dina. But it's such an interesting case. So what happens? But say I have a shar, right? Reuven has a shar. The shar killed someone. But the shar has not been judged, right? There has not been adjudication of the case. No Gemar din, no verdict. So what's the halacha? If Reuven takes that shar, machar, if he sold it, the sale works. Hekdisho mukdash, if he consecrates it, it works. Shachto, if he shechts it, besara mutter. Ultimately, again, the meat is mutter. Hechziro shomer lebailov. Let's say Reuven was a shomer and he was watching this shar and he gave back this shar which killed someone, but didn't yet have the verdict. Ultimately, again, it's considered as if he fulfilled the realities of his shmira, of his custodianship, and he's good to go. Mishnigmardin, however, again, if the animal had the verdict passed against it, so in other words, it killed, and Beis already passed the verdict, the animal has to be put to death, then what's halacha? Machro ena machar, hekdisho ena mukda, shachta besara asar. So in all these cases, if you try to sell it, the sale's not good, the hekdish is not good, and even if you shechted, the meat is not fit for consumption. Furthermore, hechziro shomer lebailov. Ultimately, again, if Reuven was a custodian and he gives back the animal to the owner, no, that doesn't work. Giving back an animal that already has a death sentence on it, that's not called giving, right? You're on the hook. You're on the hook ultimately again for this animal. Rabbi Yaakov says no. Af mishenigmar dino. Rabbi Yaakov says not true. Even halacha l'mais, if the verdict was already passed, hechziro shomer lebailov muchser. If the shomer gave back the object, right? If the shomer gave back this animal to the owner, ultimately again he fulfilled the dictates of his custodianship. So the Gemara says, what's going on over here? So essentially what you have over here is a fundamental machlokes, right? Reuven is watching the animal for Shimon. The animal killed someone. Beis Din passed the verdict that the animal has to be put to death. Reuven shows up, probably a bit sheepishly, at the home of Shimon and says, "Here, Shimon, I'm giving back your shar." Right? Meanwhile, again, he's giving back a shar that's condemned to death. So first opinion says, sorry, no good. You're on the hook for a new shar. Rabbi Yaakov says no. He's returning the shar. So what's the machlokes? Ma'ila b'akamiflagi. Rabbi Yaakov savar omrin b'isuri hana hareisha chalafanecha. Rabbi Yaakov is saying with isuri hana, again, if the object is in existence, then ultimately again, I took possession. Right? I was guarding the shar. I'm giving you back the shar. Mission accomplished. For Rabbanan Savi, the Rabbanan on the other hand hold, the Rabbanan on the other hand hold that no, you don't say by Suri Hana here, it's right in front of you. Rather, again, I will say a custodian is obligated to give back that debt which he borrowed. Amarli Rabba says no. The Chuli Alma Rabba say it's not true. Rabba say ultimately, Rabba say no, we're going to stop over here for today. Okay, shkoyach. We'll say good, we're fine. We are absolutely fine. We made good headway today. We'll leave off in the middle of this sugya. So we'll say we're leaving off in the sugya of Ba'isuri Hana. Can you just return the object as is and say Arei Shachal Lefanecha? Machlokes, of what we think it's a machlokes. And Meretz Hashem to be continued and resolved tomorrow. Shkoyach. Oh, tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. All right, good. We're going to figure it out. I don't want to talk about it.